because their bodies tell them they cannot, and they wish to prove their bodies wrong. The next image showed a human clinging to the side of a sheer rock face. There was no rope, no safety equipment, nothing between the climber and a fall of hundreds of meters. This is called free solo climbing. The mountain is El Capitan. It takes approximately 4 hours to climb. One mistake means death. The surface is smooth granite with holes smaller than a human fingertip. This is suicide, one of the delegates said. It is sport, Elena corrected. Humans do this for recreation, for the challenge, for the feeling of overcoming something that should be impossible. She showed them more. Humans diving to depths that crushed their organs, only to train their bodies to adapt. Humans swimming across freezing channels for hours. Humans lifting weights that tore their muscles, then resting and lifting heavier weights as those muscles rebuilt stronger. You observed our wars, Elena said. Let me show you something else about them. The footage changed to show a soldier crawling across a battlefield. His legs were gone below the knee, destroyed by an explosion. Blood soaked the ground beneath him. By any reasonable measure, he should have been dead or dying. This man crawled 300 meters to reach his squad, Elena said. He provided covering fire for their retreat. He killed 11 enemy combatants before losing consciousness. He survived. She showed them more soldiers, men and women who had lost limbs, eyes, organs. Many of them returned to active duty. Some of them requested to return. Your species have natural armor, regeneration, multiple hearts, Elena said. When you are injured, your bodies force you to stop fighting. Self-preservation is automatic and absolute. She pointed to the screen, where a human with 2 prosthetic legs was running a race. When we are injured, we build new parts. When our bodies fail, we create machines to replace what was lost. And when our bodies tell us to stop, we make a choice. Sometimes we listen. Sometimes we do not. The delegates were no longer murmuring. They were silent, watching. You asked why humans would run through a desert until their organs fail. The answer is the same reason we climb mountains without ropes, dive into crushing depths, and crawl across battlefields with missing limbs. Every day of our existence, we are at war with our own mortality. We wake up knowing we are fragile. We go to sleep knowing we might not wake up. And we have been doing this for 300,000 years. Elena paused and looked directly at Valethra. You see fragility. We see motivation. Every limitation you cataloged is a challenge we have been fighting since before we had words to describe it. We do not accept weakness. We do not surrender to our biology. We push until something breaks, and then we find a way to push further. She showed them hospitals. Surgeons cutting humans open to repair them, then stitching them back together. Patients screaming through physical therapy, learning to walk again through months of daily agony. Children born with conditions that should have killed them, kept alive through sheer medical stubbornness, growing up to live full lives. Other species adapt to their limitations, Elena said. Humans adapt their limitations. We are the only species in your records that routinely survives injuries that should be fatal. Not because our bodies are strong, but because our minds refuse to accept death as the default outcome. She deactivated the display. 1 year ago, you offered us protected status. You said we were too fragile for the dangers of the galaxy. I am here to tell you that you have misunderstood what fragility means to us. Elena stepped forward, her small human frame somehow commanding the attention of every massive alien in the room. Fragility is not our weakness. It is our forge. Every generation, we are tempered by our own mortality. Every generation, we refuse to break. You have lived for millions of years in bodies that protect you from the universe. We have lived for thousands of years in bodies that the universe tries to destroy. And we are still here. She smiled that same smile that had made Valethra uneasy a year ago. We are not asking to be protected. We are asking to be let loose. The vote took 47 minutes. In the history of the Galactic Concord, no decision had ever been made so quickly. The debates that usually stretched for days or weeks simply did not happen. Species that had argued over treaty provisions for centuries reached consensus without a single objection. Humanity was reclassified. The new designation was not protected species. It was not standard membership. The Concord created an entirely new category, one that had never existed in 60,000 years of galactic civilization. They called it Persistence Class, and they created it specifically for humans. Elena Vasquez stood in the assembly hall and watched the alien delegates file out. Many of them stopped to look at her, really look at her, in a way they had not done before. She was still small. She was still soft. She was still old and gray and mortal. But something in their eyes had changed. Valethra was the last to approach. The Kethori ambassador moved slowly, her four legs carrying her massive form with unexpected grace. She stopped in front of Elena and was silent for a long moment. "I have studied your species for 30 years, she finally said. "I thought I understood you. I was wrong." Elena nodded. "You understood our bodies. You did not understand our minds. We measure strength in what a species can endure," Valethra said. "You measure it in something else. Something I do not have a word for." "Stubbornness," Elena suggested. "Defiance. The refusal to accept limits just because they exist." Valethra's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "There is a species in the outer regions. The Vreth. They are conquerors. They have destroyed dozens of civilizations. They are massive, armored, brutal. They regenerate from almost any wound. They feel no pain. I've read about them in your files. When the Vreth encounter a new species, they test them. They attack without warning, without mercy. If the species breaks, the Vreth consume them. If the species fights back, the Vreth consider them worthy of respect." Elena waited. "The Concord has been at war with the Vreth for 9,000 years, Valethra continued. "We have fought them to a standstill, but we have never defeated them. We have never broken them, and they have never broken us." She paused. "I wonder what they would make of your species. I suppose we'll find out eventually. You do not seem concerned." Elena smiled. "Ambassador, my species spent millions of years being hunted by predators with bigger teeth, sharper claws, and faster legs. We survived by being too stubborn to die and too clever to stay prey. Whatever the Vreth are, we faced worse." The years that followed proved her right. Human volunteers spread across the galaxy. They did not take the safe jobs, the administrative roles, the protected positions. They took the missions no one else wanted, the ones with high mortality rates, the ones that required traveling to hostile environments, negotiating with dangerous species, exploring uncharted regions where anything could kill you. They died. They died in numbers that horrified their alien allies. They died in ways that were painful and terrible and seemingly pointless. And more humans volunteered to take their places, but they also succeeded. Missions that had been abandoned as impossible were completed by human crews who simply refused to accept failure. Negotiations that had stalled for centuries were resolved by human diplomats who sat at tables for days without sleep, outlasting opponents who needed rest. Expeditions that had lost entire fleets to hostile conditions were salvaged by human survivors, who should have been dead, but kept going anyway. The Concord began to study humans with new eyes, not as fragile creatures to be protected, but as something unprecedented. A species forged by weakness into something that transcended weakness. A species that had turned mortality into a motivation. 10 years after the reclassification, Valethra gave a speech to the full Concord Assembly. She was old now by Kithori standards, her exoskeleton dulled with age, her movements slower than they once were. But her voice was strong. When I first encountered humanity, she said, I pitied them. I thought the galaxy would destroy them. I thought we were being kind by offering them protection, the way one might shelter a child from a storm. She paused and looked out at the assembled delegates. I was a fool. Humanity does not need protection from storms. They are the storm. Not because they are powerful, but because they do not know how to stop. Their bodies break, and they keep going. Their ships fail, and they keep going. Their plans collapse. Their allies abandon them. Their enemies overwhelm them, and still they keep going. She gestured to a display showing human activity across the galaxy. Colonies on worlds that had been deemed uninhabitable. Trade routes through regions that had been considered impassable. Diplomatic relationships with species that had been classified as unreachable. We measured strength in what a species can endure, Valethra said. Humans measure it in what a species refuses to surrender to. They have taught me that there is a difference. Endurance is passive. It is waiting for pain to stop. What humans do is active. It is choosing to continue despite the pain, not because they cannot feel it, but because they refuse to let it define their limits. She turned to face the Keth-Ori delegation directly. We called them fragile. They called it motivation. They were right, and we were wrong. The fragile species from the small blue planet has become the most requested specialists for impossible missions. The ship that brought Ambassador Valethra to Earth was the size of a small city. It hung in the sky above Geneva like a second moon, blocking out the sun and casting a shadow that stretched for miles. Humans gathered in the streets to stare at it. Some prayed. Some screamed. Most just stood there with their mouths open, trying to understand that everything they thought they knew about the universe had just changed. Valethra watched the humans through the observation deck of her vessel. She had studied their species for 30 years, ever since the long-range sensors first detected their radio signals bleeding out into space. She knew their history, their languages, their biology. She knew them better than they knew themselves, or so she believed. What she saw confirmed everything in her reports. The humans were small. They were soft. They gathered in crowds like herd animals, seeking safety in numbers. When her shuttle descended through the atmosphere, some of them ran. Others fainted. A few threw rocks at the sky, which Valethra found almost endearing in its futility. The meeting took place in a building the humans called the United Nations. Valethra had to duck to fit through the doorways, and she noticed how the human guards flinched when she passed. She stood 8 feet tall on 4 powerful legs, her exoskeleton gleaming like polished bronze. Her secondary arms folded across her chest, while her primary arms gestured as she spoke. She had 3 eyes arranged in a triangle on her face, and all of them could see the fear in the room. The humans had arranged themselves at a long curved table. There were dozens of them, representing what they called nations. Valethra found this concept amusing. On her world, there was one government, one people, one purpose. The idea that a species would divide itself into competing groups seemed primitive and wasteful. Dr. Alina Vasquez sat at the center of the human delegation. She was a small woman with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes. Valethra's files identified her as a xenolinguist, one of the humans who had spent their career preparing for this moment, even when most of their kind thought it would never come. She did not flinch when Valethra approached. She did not look away. This was unusual. On behalf of the Galactic Concord, Valethra began, her translation device converting her clicks and whistles into human speech. I bring greetings to the people of Earth. You have been observed. You have been studied. You have been judged worthy of contact. A murmur rippled through the human delegates. Valethra waited for it to subside before continuing. The Concord consists of 412 spacefaring species. We have maintained peace and cooperation for over 60,000 of your years. We offer humanity the opportunity to join us, to share in our knowledge and resources, to take your place among the stars. The humans exchanged glances. Some of them smiled. Others looked suspicious. Elena Vasquez simply watched and listened. However, Valethra continued, "Before we proceed, you must understand certain realities about your species and your place in the galactic order." She activated a holographic display that floated above the table. Images appeared showing human anatomy compared to other Concord species. The differences were striking, and from Valethra's perspective, deeply concerning. Human bones have a tensile strength of approximately 130 megapascals, she explained. The Concord average is 890. Your skin tears under pressures that would not even register to most species. You cannot survive temperature variations beyond a narrow range. You require constant intake of specific gases, liquids, and organic matter to function. You must become unconscious for 8 hours out of every 24, during which time you are completely vulnerable. She showed them more comparisons. Humans versus the rock-like Threvan, who could survive in vacuum. Humans versus the aquatic Melmery, who could hold their breath for days. Humans versus her own Keth-Ori people, whose exoskeletons could deflect projectile weapons and whose forehearts provided redundancy against injury. Your average lifespan is less than 100 years, Valethra said. The Concord average is 400. You cannot regenerate damaged tissue beyond superficial wounds. You have no natural armor, no venom, no defensive mechanisms of any kind. By every measurable standard, humans are the most physically fragile sapient species we have ever encountered. The room had gone very quiet. Some of the human delegates looked angry. Others looked ashamed. A few looked like they wanted to argue, but did not know where to begin. This is not meant as an insult, Valethra said, though she suspected they would take it as one regardless. It is simply fact. The galaxy is a dangerous place. There are species that would see you as prey. There are environments that would kill you in seconds. There are conflicts that have raged for millennia, and you are not equipped to participate in them. She deactivated the display and folded all four of her arms in a gesture of conclusion. The Concord has therefore determined that humanity will be granted provisional membership with protected status. You will be assigned to administrative and support roles only. You will not be permitted to engage in exploration of hazardous zones, military operations, or any activity that would put your fragile forms at undue risk. This is for your own protection. The silence stretched. Valethra waited for the humans to accept the inevitable, to recognize that she was offering them a kindness by shielding them from a universe that would otherwise destroy them. Elena Vasquez leaned forward. Her voice was calm and clear when she spoke. "Ambassador, I appreciate the thoroughness of your assessment. May I ask some questions?" Valethra inclined her head. "Of course. You mentioned that you have observed us for some time. How long exactly?" "Approximately 60 of your years. And in that time, did you observe our history? Our wars? Our explorations?" "We did. Your capacity for violence against your own kind is well documented. It is another reason for concern." Elena nodded slowly. "Did you observe what we do when we're told something is impossible?" Valethra's third eye blinked. "I do not understand the question." "I think you will," Elena said. "I would like to request a delay before we accept your classification. 1 standard year. I would like the opportunity to present a counter-assessment." Several of the other human delegates looked at her with confusion. The Keth-Ori ambassador's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "You wish to argue against biological fact?" I wish to provide context for biological fact, Elena replied. Surely the Concord values complete information before making final determinations. Valethra considered this. The request was unusual, but it would cost nothing to grant. And she was curious what argument these fragile creatures could possibly make. Very well. 1 year. The Concord will hear your counter-assessment. Elena smiled, and something in that smile made Valethra's secondary hearts beat faster. It was not the smile of someone accepting defeat. It was the smile of someone who had just been given exactly what they wanted. Elena Vasquez did not sleep for the first 3 days after the meeting. She gathered a team of the brightest minds humanity had to offer, people from every field and every nation. Scientists, historians, athletes, soldiers, doctors, philosophers. She told them what the aliens had said, and then she told them what she needed. They think we're weak because we can break, she said. We need to show them what we do after we break. The year passed quickly. Elena's team collected data from every corner of human experience. They documented achievements that seemed ordinary to humans, but would appear impossible to species who had never needed to fight against their own limitations. They recorded interviews, gathered footage, and compiled statistics. They built a case. When the day came, Valethra returned to Earth with a delegation of observers from a dozen Concord species. They filled the assembly hall with their strange bodies and stranger eyes. Some floated in anti-gravity harnesses. Others breathed through specialized filters. One species existed as a collective of thousands of tiny organisms that moved together. Like a living cloud, Elena stood before them all. She looked small and old and fragile, exactly as they expected. But her voice did not waver when she began to speak. Ambassador Valethra, honored representatives, thank you for this opportunity. 1 year ago, you presented us with an assessment of human biology. Every fact you shared was accurate. We are indeed soft. We are indeed breakable. We do indeed die easily by your standards. She paused and looked around the room, meeting eyes and sensors and other organs of perception. But you made an error in your analysis. You measured what we are. You did not measure what we do with what we are. She activated her own holographic display. The first image showed a human running through a desert landscape. The sand stretched to the horizon in every direction, and the sun blazed overhead. This is the Marathon des Sables, Elena said. Every year, humans choose to run 250 kilometers across the Sahara Desert. The temperature exceeds 50 degrees Celsius. There is no shelter. There is no rescue. They carry their own supplies and sleep in tents. Many of them suffer dehydration, heat stroke, and organ failure. She let that sink in before continuing. The record for completion is 16 hours. Most take several days. Some die. And every year, thousands more sign up to try. The alien delegates shifted and murmured. Valethra's mandibles clicked in confusion. Why would they do this? She asked. Because it is difficult, Elena replied. Not because they cannot break, but because breaking does not stop them. The speech was archived and distributed across the galaxy. It was studied in academies and debated in councils. It changed how the Concord understood not just humans, but themselves. Elena Vasquez watched the broadcast from her home on Earth. She was 73 years old now. Her hair was fully gray, and she walked with a cane on days when her joints ached too badly. She was everything the aliens had said humans were: fragile, mortal, temporary. But she had watched her species rise. She had seen them take their place among the stars. She had watched them refuse to accept limits simply because those limits existed. When the broadcast ended, she stood and walked to her window. The alien ship that had once blocked out the sun was gone now, replaced by a human-built station that served as a gateway to the galaxy. Humans came and went in ships of their own design, heading out to places that would have seemed like fantasy when she was young. She thought about all the times her body had failed her, all the injuries, the illnesses, the slow decay of age. She thought about all the times she had kept going anyway, not because she had to, but because she chose to. The aliens had been right about human fragility. They broke easily. They died young. They suffered in ways that other species never had to experience, but they had been wrong about what that meant. Elena Vasquez smiled. The same smile she had given Valethra all those years ago. She was still fragile. She was still mortal. She was still temporary. She had never felt stronger in her life. 30 years after first contact, the Vreth came. They arrived without warning, as they always did. A fleet of warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of human space and began their systematic advance. The Vreth did not negotiate. They did not communicate. They simply attacked, testing the new species as they had tested dozens of others. The first human colony to fall was New Geneva, a small settlement on a moon-orbiting gas giant. The Vreth ships descended through the atmosphere and unleashed their ground forces. The colonists had no military presence, no defense grid, no weapons beyond hunting rifles and farming equipment. They fought anyway. The recordings from New Geneva spread across the galaxy in hours. Humans with no combat training charging Vreth warriors twice their size. Farmers using tractors as battering rams against armored vehicles. Parents standing in doorways with kitchen knives, refusing to let the invaders reach their children. The colony was destroyed. Every human there died. But the last transmission showed a Vreth commander standing over a human body, and even through the alien armor, something in its posture suggested confusion. The human had been dead for several minutes. Its heart had stopped, its brain had ceased functioning, but its hand was still locked around a Vreth throat, and 3 of its fingers had punched through a gap in the armor. The Vreth it had attacked was dying too. They do not stop. The commander's report read. Even when dead, they do not stop. The Concord mobilized for war. They had been fighting the Vreth for 9,000 years, and they knew the pattern. The Vreth would test humanity, find them wanting, and consume them. It had happened before to species far stronger than humans. It would happen again, but the humans had a different plan. Elena Vasquez was 93 years old when the War Council convened. She needed a breathing apparatus now, and her hands shook when she moved. She should have been retired, resting, preparing for the end that came to all fragile things. Instead, she stood before the assembled representatives of the Galactic Concord and spoke in a voice that still did not waver. "You want to defend us," she said. "You want to protect us from the Vreth, the way you once wanted to protect us from the galaxy. I am here to tell you that we do not need your protection." The delegates murmured. The Vreth had destroyed civilizations that made humanity look like insects. "We need your resources," Elena continued. "Your ships, your weapons, your intelligence. We need everything you can give us. But we do not need you to fight for us. We need you to let us fight for ourselves." Valethra, now the eldest member of the Keth Ori delegation, spoke up. "The Vreth have conquered species with natural armor, species with regeneration, species that can survive in vacuum. What makes you think humans can succeed where they failed?" Elena smiled her old familiar smile. Because those species had something to lose. She activated a display showing human volunteers lining up at recruitment centers across Earth and its colonies. There were millions of them. Young and old, healthy and sick, experienced soldiers, and people who had never held a weapon. "The Vreth test species to see if they break," Elena said. "They have never encountered a species that treats breaking as a beginning rather than an end. They have never fought something that gets back up after it falls, that keeps coming after it should be dead, that refuses to accept defeat, even when defeat is the only rational option. She turned to face the council directly. You asked me 30 years ago what we do when we're told something is impossible. Now you will see. The war lasted 7 years. Humanity did not win through superior firepower or advanced technology. They won through what they had always had, the absolute refusal to surrender. Human soldiers fought until their weapons ran dry, then fought with their hands. Human ships rammed wreath vessels rather than retreat. Human colonies under siege held out for months past the point of possible survival, not because they could be rescued, but because every day they held was a day the wreath could not advance. The wreath did not understand. Their entire philosophy was built on the idea that weak species broke and strong species endured. Humans were weak. This was undeniable. Their bodies failed under conditions that wreath children could survive. They died from injuries that were minor inconveniences to the conquerors, but they did not break. Every human the wreath killed was replaced by 2 more volunteers. Every colony they destroyed spawned a dozen resistance cells that continued fighting from the rubble. Every victory they achieved seemed to make the humans angrier, more determined, more relentless. The turning point came at the Battle of Proxima Reach. A wreath fleet of 300 ships faced a human defense force of 40. The outcome was never in doubt. The humans would lose, and everyone knew it. They attacked anyway. The human ships flew directly into the wreath formation, not trying to survive, just trying to cause damage. They crashed into wreath vessels, detonated their reactors against enemy hulls, rammed their fighters into weapon systems. Within an hour, all 40 human ships were destroyed, but so were 67 wreath vessels. The wreath commander sent a transmission to the Concorde, demanding to understand what kind of species they had encountered. The response came from a human admiral who had lost her fleet, her crew, and one of her arms in the battle. "We are humans," she said. "We break. We die. We suffer, and we keep coming. You can kill us, but you cannot make us stop. You can destroy everything we have, but you cannot destroy what we are. We were forged by a universe that tried to kill us every single day, and we have been refusing to die for 300,000 years." She smiled through the blood on her face. "Welcome to our war." The wreath retreated 3 months later. It was the first time in 9,000 years they had retreated from any conflict. Their final transmission was studied by Concorde scholars for decades. "They are broken," the wreath commander reported. "They are weak. They die easily. But they do not stop. We cannot conquer a species that does not know how to surrender. We cannot break something that rebuilds itself every time it falls. We withdraw. Let them keep their worlds. They've earned them." Elena Vasquez died 2 years after the war ended. She was 99 years old, and she passed quietly in her sleep on the same Earth where she had been born. The Concorde declared a day of mourning across all 412 member species. Belethra gave the eulogy. The ancient Kethori stood over Elena's grave, her exoskeleton weathered by time, her voice still strong. 60 years ago, I came to this planet to tell humanity they were fragile. I came to offer them protection from a galaxy that would break them. I was wrong. Humanity does not need protection. They need only the chance to prove what they are. She looked at the gathered mourners, humans and aliens together. Elena Vasquez taught me that fragility is not weakness. It is the crucible in which true strength is forged. Humans break, and they rebuild. They fall, and they rise. They die, and their children carry on. They are not strong despite their fragility. They are strong because of it. The tombstone was simple, as Elena had requested. It bore only her name, her dates, and a single phrase that would become the unofficial motto of humanity's place in the galaxy. We called it motivation. The wind carried Velethra's final words across the cemetery and out into the world that humans had built. the world they had fought for, the world they had earned through nothing but the stubborn refusal to accept that fragility meant defeat. Rest now, Elena. You have shown us what humans are. The galaxy will never forget. And they never did.